This morning's gospel reading gives us a great chance for something I love, but may not fill you with as much joy. And that's some proper Bible nerd stuff. I am a self-confessed 42-year-old Bible nerd. I love the nerdiness of Scripture. And there's one thing that I love in particular, and that's a good map. So if we go to the next slide, I love a good Bible map. If you ever get a good study Bible, you'll know it's a good one because at the back you have a bunch of maps that help you look at the geography of the place in which the stories that we read are set. And it helps us to imagine the conditions of the world in which that we read about and that we base our lives on our knowledge of. So, in verse 11, in our reading, the first verse of the gospel reading, we read that Jesus was walking between Samaria and Galilee. Now, I don't have a laser pointer yet, but I'm not promising I won't get one in the future. Up in the top left-hand side of this screen, can you see Galilee written in red letters in a white box? So that's where Galilee is. And then you see underneath it, there's Samaria marked out in blue. And then underneath that, you see Judea. And in the middle of Judea, you see Jerusalem. So it says that Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem, but he was traveling from Galilee. And if you were able to zoom in on the map, you would see a bunch of different places in Galilee that are familiar to us. For example, Nazareth, which is where Jesus is from, Jesus of Nazareth. The disciples were called at the Sea of Galilee, which is that green spot up there. There's Magdala, which is where Mary Magdalene probably came from. There's Capernaum, which is where Jesus probably based himself for a good portion of his ministry. Over on the left-hand side and in the blue, you'll see Caesarea, or what is known as Caesarea Philippi, which is the place where Jesus went with the disciples at different points. It helps us to have this picture of the land in which Jesus lived and the journey that he was going on, particularly when we understand who lived in what places. It says that Jesus was walking through the region between Samaria and Galilee. So kind of just on the border between the yellow area of Galilee and the blue area of Samaria, which would be a contested space. You see, Samaria is where we get the word Samaritan. And Jews and Samaritans in the first century absolutely hated each other. There's a long and complicated history there that we can't go into this morning, but what we need to know today is that these two groups of people did not hang out together. And yet, we find in this group of lepers that he meets, we find a group of people who, for some reason, wandering in these hostile borderlands, are a group of people, a group of lepers who are bound together not by their affiliation racially or religiously, but by their affliction. They've overcome the fact that they were Jews and Samaritans because their suffering has brought them together. And they wander in the borderlands in these areas as lepers, people who live on the outside. So Jesus, it says in verse 12, he enters a village and they approach him. But then if we go to the next slide there, James, it says that they keep their distance. Why did they keep their distance? Leprosy is not something we're massively familiar with today. It's been eradicated in most of the world, though there are still some places where leprosy is a live issue and where people continue to suffer from it. But it is also an issue that is part of the world in which we have lived here in Ireland. For example, did you know that there is a leper colony there was a historical leper colony within about 3 kilometers of where we are here? Which is now called? Leopardstown, yeah. One of the most fantastic rebrandings I've ever heard. If we just changed leper to leopard, I think we could really drive up house prices. But their sickness in the world in which they live, it made them impure in every way that mattered. Firstly, according to the religious law or the Torah, or what we often call the Old Testament, they were ritually impure and couldn't enter the temple or the presence of God. But secondly, they would have been contagious to the touch in terms of this religious impurity. And people also believed that leprosy itself was extremely contagious. So everyone stayed away from them. Everywhere they went, they would have a radius around them of empty space between everyone that they met. and everyone that they knew. That's why when they approach Jesus, they keep their distance. Luke includes it in the story because distance is the common factor in their lives. It's built into every interaction they have with people because they're excluded, outsiders. They're infected, impure, and contagious. And so Jesus sends them off to see a priest, which is exactly what they wanted. If they were healed and they would need to be, or if they recovered from leprosy, they would need to see a priest in order to have their recovery be officially mandated so they could return to normal life together. And just in the act of going, they are healed. Just by taking steps in the direction that Jesus instructs, they are healed. And I feel like that tells us something about God and faith, that they are healed at the beginning of their journey rather than at the end. But that, I feel, is like a chapter for a book I'll write at another stage rather than something we can dive into today. But they go, and they realize in going that they are healed. And one of them turns back, and when he returns, he prostrates himself at Jesus' feet. He doesn't continue walking away like his friends. He's not keeping his distance like he used to. Instead, he lays down at Jesus' feet in thanksgiving, overwhelmed with gratitude and thanking Jesus for what he has done, for giving him his life back. What strikes Jesus in this moment is that 10 were healed, but only one returned. And what's more confusing is the one who returned was a Samaritan, an outsider, someone who didn't believe the promises that Jesus was the fulfillment of. And so this passage, it set me to musing, to reflecting on gratitude and what it leads to and what it makes of us as individuals and communities. Gratitude is so central to our lives together. I think gratitude is at the heart, and being grateful is at the heart of building community and doing life together well. Sometimes the best way to reflect on why something is important is actually to imagine a scenario without it. And I think we all know that the absence of gratitude, particularly in Irish culture, is a community destroyer. It leaves people feeling taken for granted, neglected, and invisible. I told you a few weeks ago about that strange Irish foible that we have, where on the bus, as we're getting off, we'll thank the bus driver. And that beautiful response the driver of the 84 gave to me, and when he said, "Don't worry about it, I was going this way anyway." It disrupted my habit of saying thank you, and I suddenly thought about it for the first time and went, oh, why am I? But of course, but it would be weird not to thank. And here it is weird not to thank. When we don't thank, it leaves people taken for granted, neglected, and feeling invisible. So here's why I think gratitude is important. I think it tells us two things. The first one is a really profound message that we give each other, and that message is, I see you. This next slide here, James. It says, I see you. It says, I saw what you did, and it meant something to me. It says, my life is easier, better, richer, or whatever because of what you did or because of who you are. I see you. To thank someone is to see them, and being seen is a powerful thing. Few things hurt more than feeling invisible or feeling taken for granted. When we see each other and acknowledge each other and speak words of thanks and gratitude, those words can heal wounds. They can bestow confidence. They can fill others with warmth and light. Gratitude is one way in which we offer each other the gift of being seen. And being seen is at the heart of being known. But the second thing that gratitude does is it also does something to us as well. Because it means we say something else. It means we say, I needed that. It's saying your help or your presence or your gift, it mattered because it gave me something that I didn't have. Maybe time, maybe presence, maybe support, maybe enough money, maybe enough expertise, maybe enough wisdom. Whatever it was you gave, you provided something that I lacked. And in a world that prizes and rewards self-sufficiency and individuality, that's a vulnerable thing to say. To say, I needed that. It means admitting that we need each other. It draws us closer in authentic, vulnerable community and relationship. Now, those things are crucial, but I don't think they're necessarily the crux of this passage. What is crucial is that the only one of the 10 that came back to Jesus was the one who is the Samaritan, the Gentile, the outsider, who had the most reason to reject who Jesus was based on his story, his history, and his background. And sadly, this passage, it follows this consistent story that the Bible lays out about how the people of God failed to understand what God was calling them to. Throughout the Old Testament, God has a mission to reach the world through people. He calls Abraham and his descendants, and he promises to bless them in order that they would be a blessing to the world. Tragically, so much of the rest of their story is God's people hoarding these blessings for themselves instead of sharing them with the world and failing to live in a distinctive way that God invited them to. They are blessed to be a blessing, not blessed because blessing is something that they deserve or entitled to. So what we see here is the lepers who are part of the people of God. They take their blessing and they move on. The 9 receive healing and they move on and go back on with their lives. They demonstrate a tragic lack of gratitude about the one who healed them, and also a devastating lack of curiosity about what it means, about who he is, and about what they're invited to. But not so with the Samaritan. He comes back and he does what he couldn't do before. He comes close, which is closer now because of his healing, and his relationship with God is suddenly marked by gratitude and praise. The Jewish lepers consider their healing something that they're entitled to, but the Gentile leper considers his healing to be a gift. For me, that's at the heart of the Christian life. That we do not consider our blessings from God to be something that we are entitled to. Rather, we see them as a blessing that we have been entrusted with. We have been blessed to be a blessing. So instead of asking, how much more can we have? We say, Jesus, thank you for everything that you have given us. Help us to be stewards of what you have entrusted us with, so that the world may be blessed with your generosity. May our blessings bring blessing to the world around us. May our healing and wholeness bring healing and wholeness where we live and love. May we be a people of thankfulness who see each other and who in vulnerability continue to return to Jesus and to each other in giving thanks and drawing close.